Simen toy vi mazel toy simen toy ye haluni ye khol isru wailu mein oh simen toy vi mazel toy simen toy vi mazel toy simen toy ye haluni ye khol isru wailu mein alu mit skole yakoy asel sandu bahatay du vil melch isru wai Sadu bahatai du vid melech Yisroel chai vekayom du vid melech Yisroel du vid melech Yisroel du vid melech Yisroel chai vekayom oh simen toy vi mazel toy simen toy vi mazel toy simen toy ye haluni ye khol Yisroel mein oh simen toy vi mazel tov, mazel tov, simen tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, simen tov. Yehaluni lechol Yisrael mein.
Avraham Yitzchak veYaakov, as yonosadu behadai, dufet melech Yisrael, chai vekayom, dufet melech Yisrael, dufet melech Yisrael, dufet melech Yisrael, chai vekayom.
Shalom, my dear friends, Shalom and Shavua Tov from here in the holy city of Jerusalem, Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh. Today, the 24th day of the month of Tevet of the year 5777, corresponding to the 22nd of January of the year 2017. As we enter into the concluding week of this month of Tevet, which really connects Hanukkah, which was at the beginning of Tevet, with already the introduction to the theme of the destruction of our temple on the 10th of Tevet, but now moving to spring, towards regeneration and regrowth, with the coming new moon of the month of Shevat that we already yesterday blessed in the synagogue after the Torah reading, and this will come on Friday night and Shabbat, coming Friday night and Shabbat of the portion of Va'ero, and we are getting closer and closer to a season that is really all festivals. Every 2 weeks we have this coming Shabbat Rosh Chodesh, the new moon of Shevat, and then just 2 weeks later we will have Tu B'Shvat, the 15th of Shvat, the new year of the Ilan, of the tree, celebrating with the partaking of the fruits of the tree and celebration of the tree of life. Just 2 weeks after that, we will have Rosh Chodesh Adar, the new moon of the 12th month of the year, the month of Adar, the month of the redemption according to the future pattern, that is the redemption of Purim, which is, according to Rabbi Nachman, the paradigm for the future redemption. And so that will be just 5 weeks down the line. The Rosh Chodesh Adar, followed 2 weeks later by Purim itself, followed 2 weeks after that by Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the new moon of the month of the archetypal redemption of all time, the redemption from Egypt, followed 2 weeks later by Pesach, and followed 2 weeks after that by the new moon of Iyar. We have literally a festival and celebration every 2 weeks now into the Omer counts season after Pesach. And now, as we do approach the month of Shevat, we are the beginning of the second week of the Shovavim, the series of the Torah readings of the beginning of Exodus, whose initial letters spell out that word Shovavim from the verse in Jeremiah of the wayward children. We are called to repent and return in this period of the Shovavim. And as we advance into the narrative of the Torah in the book of Exodus about the 10 plagues that afflicted Egypt, here we have at the beginning of our portion God's absolute promise and reassurance to Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher, that despite the apparent darkening and hardship, the redemption is indeed now coming in full swing, and surely God will lead Israel out of Egypt. And our portion, therefore, is emphasizing the fulfillment of God's promise to the patriarchs, to Abraham, to Isaac, and Jacob, that there would be a period of exile, but that Israel will come out of it, and out of even the darkest and deepest of exiles. The tremendous encouragement and comfort that comes out of the opening verses of the coming week's portion of Va'ero. But then the narrative, after describing the pedigree of Moses and Aaron from those who came with Jacob into Egypt, launches into Moses and Aaron going into Pharaoh now and demanding that Pharaoh release the children of Israel, and beginning the series of plagues that afflict Egypt. In our portion, we have 7 of the 10 plagues, and in the coming portion thereafter, we have the climactic 3 last plagues of the locusts, the darkness, and the death of the firstborn of Egypt. One very interesting thing which we do find in our portion, which flies completely in the face of contemporary political correctness, is that throughout the narrative of the plagues that afflicted the Egyptians, God made an absolute discrimination between the Israelites in their area of Goshen, or indeed wherever they might have been in Egypt, and the Egyptians. No Israelite in that series of plagues suffered from the plagues. They watched the Egyptians suffering all around them, and they themselves were not part of those plagues. And this is a very important part of the message I'd like to share with you today, because anybody looking at the media of any kind, the mass media, the alternative media, your Facebook friends' posts, everyone can see that we are in a world that is writhing in agony. And there are plagues all around us. And the challenge is, to what extent can the awakening Israel today, as we do stand on the very threshold of redemption, how can we turn the surrounding plagues to our advantage as a reaffirmation of our faith in the absolute power and majesty of God? For that's what happened in Egypt during the year from the time of Moses first beginning his ministry in Egypt until the time of the actual Exodus. During that year of the plagues, the children of Israel were largely passive witnesses of the plagues. Where they participated was, for example, to sell a bucket of water to an Egyptian, and the water, as soon as it passed into the ownership of the Egyptian, immediately turned into blood. So the extent of the participation of the Israelite in the plague of blood was to actually experience on the level of trade and commerce how the Egyptians were getting plagued by everything around them in their environment. But otherwise, the role of the Israelites was largely passive until the time when they were called to take the Paschal lamb and prepare to slaughter it and get ready to get up and leave Egypt. So our portion in particular speaks about the plagues to which the Israelites were passive observers. And indeed it is part of Minhag Yisrael, the custom of Israel, on the night of Pesach, the Seder night, when we recount to our children, and we ourselves are the children listening to the narrative once again. We recount in great detail the 10 plagues. It's customary for the celebrant of the Pesach Seder to launch off into descriptions out of the Midrashim about what actually happened in these plagues. And these come to impress upon us the absolute control of God over the entire universe around us, the entire world around us. And it's very fitting to consider the plagues that are afflicting our societies and our world today, because clearly it's writhing in agony. The United Nations itself is obsessed with the warming of the world's climate and all the allegedly catastrophic consequences that this is expected to have. Shrewder observers of all of the international gatherings and conferences on this subject, which are attended by the world's statesmen and diplomats traveling in their private jets and consuming vast quantities of fuel to talk about how everybody else should reduce their consumption of fuel. This is one of the nightmares facing the world, whether you agree with the thesis of global warming or you don't. It's quite clear that the global environment and the actual environment of cities and industrial regions across the world are writhing from the terrible plagues of pollution, with the catastrophic cost they carry in terms of health issues, of people's lungs and their hearts and everything else. And we are indeed seeing that it is the very rapacious pursuit of wealth being practiced, particularly by the upper slice of the world's population, the top echelon, the top elite who command the resources. It's the governments and those that control them, and those that control the companies that are contracted to do the various things that are actually pillaging the environment. This is boomeranging back into the very faces of the world that is creating this depletion of its own environment. And we see that in the case of the modern world, the plague is self-inflicted. Every day we are witness to fresh aspects of this catastrophe. It's well known that the bee colonies have been suffering in the last decade and more, for nobody has conclusively determined what is causing this, be it the radio waves in the air of all of our mobile phones that are destroying the bees' ability to navigate and so on. Whatever it may be, the bees who play a vital part in the chain of the production of fruits through the through their going from flower to flower and impregnating the flowers and causing the growth of fruits. This humble, busy worker is actually being destroyed, as are numerous other species. The ecologists are crying and screaming about the number of species of animals that are either have become extinct or are threatened with extinction because of this rapacious human grab led by the top level of ownership, the powerful of today's global system. This rapacity is itself causing the destruction of the very world that they are turning to enrich themselves, but they could not care because they subscribe to the philosophy of let us eat and drink and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Well, when the Israelites are exposed to urban agglomerations that have clouds of smog and other forms of pollution over them, when we go about our business and everywhere except in the most remote places, we are bombarded, our brains, with all kinds of waves, unseen waves. We are breathing in toxic air. If we cannot subsist without products from the supermarkets and mass-produced food products, we are just bombarding our systems with all kinds of insane additives and pesticides and preservatives and all kind of other things. I've heard, in the name of a competent police officers that are involved in autopsies and investigations into crimes, when they need to establish how long a body has been dead, it becomes more difficult in our time because the amount of preservatives in the foods that people imbibe from the products is so great that it impedes the decomposition of the body, so that earlier estimates of how far decomposition would have advanced on a particular date are no longer applicable because bodies take longer to decompose. So we do see how our bodies are getting filled with unwanted substances, and we see the cost of this in the heavily overloaded healthcare services, where which are an empire, an enormous empire unto themselves, and where the plague is of the catastrophic neglect which the health services display towards the people who are paying to keep them going, the catastrophic prices which the prized priests of this system, the doctors and professors, are getting for their salaries, and the colossal amounts for the equipment that is being used, and for the operatives of that equipment, the paramedics and everybody else in this vast international empire with its ramifications into pharmaceutical industry and the marketing of all of the concoctions that are being made. This itself is the very plague that is leading to the accelerated dementia across the populations, to Alzheimer's disease, to all kinds of other illnesses, to autism in children, and to every other kind of thing. So, well, what is the Israelite to do about this, caught, trapped in this toxic surrounding civilization where you cannot entirely separate from the surrounding environment? Well, for one thing, one of the foundational commandments of the Torah is for us to take care of ourselves and our bodies. Maimonides' Rambam opens with this teaching in chapter 4 of the laws of de'ot, the laws of attitudes and lifestyle, where he says that the service of God is impossible without a healthy body, and therefore we have to do everything we can to protect and enhance the health of our bodies. He prescribes a completely naturopathic pathway of health maintenance, for which he has very great promises, and it is certainly incumbent upon us to develop our nutrition and our diet, not because that is what is being foisted upon us by the mass media, by the advertising, by what is supposed to be fashionable to eat, or what is pushed upon us by the supermarkets and by the food producers, producing companies. It's incumbent upon us to search out a healthy way of life. Is an Israelite diet, is that kosher, both in terms of physical health and in terms of spiritual health. Indeed, there are all kinds of evils in the surrounding culture that can be avoided through following the path of kashrut. There are the possibility of disease coming from competently kosher, slaughtered and prepared meats. The possibility of disease from this is far less in normal circumstances than it is from the meat coming out of many of the abattoirs across the world today, in the conditions under which animals are actually slaughtered, as opposed to the way legislators would like to think that they ought to be slaughtered. So a kosher diet. The question has recently come up about the dangers of physical circumcision. It's been claimed in some circles that because there have been a couple of cases in America recently of babies that were infected with the herpes virus, apparently because of the practice of the mohel, the person conducting the circumcision, performing the mitzvah of metzitzah, of sucking briefly the organ of the baby immediately after circumcision to draw out the blood. And in proper conditions. It's done in a very hygienic manner, this ancient custom, but because there were a couple of cases of herpes, it was claimed that circumcision ought to be banned, but that is not the solution. The solution is to register and to check on the mohel to see that he meets the necessary criteria of physical health himself, and then to allow this ancient custom that's been going on continuously for many thousands of years to continue. And on the other side of the argument, it is found that actually the protection against most forms of HIV virus afforded by circumcision is far greater than in the case of those who are not circumcised. So we do see that the Torah pathway in itself does have the power to protect us even physically against the wider world. Another example of a different kind of protection on the spiritual level would be the mezuzah. When the children of Israel went out of Egypt in order to protect their houses from the destroyer, on the night that all of the firstborn of Egypt died, the Israelites were commanded to daub the doorposts of their homes with the blood of the Paschal Lamb. Now the home here became an altar, and indeed our homes are our altar of service of God, and the sign on the door for us is the mezuzah. There's no comparison between a house that has mezuzah on the entrance of the house and on the living rooms of the house, as opposed to a house that has no mezuzah. The house that has the mezuzah is under the protection of the one God. The name of the one God is attached to the very doorposts and the walls of the house. And that alone, those holy names in the mezuzah, are drawing holiness into the house, enabling that holiness to reach into us, to come into us. And we live in that tranquility and calm of the holiness of the mezuzah. There was in Yerushalayim, until some years ago when he passed away, a very saintly Chacham sage who was particularly expert in the realm of the mitzvah of mezuzah. He would go traveling, and when people would come to visit him and to ask him questions, he would ask to see the mezuzah of the room where the situation described by the visitors was taking place. And he could open the mezuzah and tell the people there, without any information from them previously, exactly what was going on in the room. I had a personal instance of such a case from an acquaintance of mine in London, England, who told me that when he visited this sage from Yerushalayim and showed him the mezuzah of the room of his son, the sage said to him, "Your son is lame in one leg, isn't he?" And that was the truth. The sage knew that from the mezuzah. There was a case of the tefillin of a certain man that in the portions of his tefillin, when after he died, the tefillin were opened up, and one of the letters was missing. The man had died from a massive heart attack, and the letter of the tefillin that was missing from the portion of his tefillin was one of the letters bet of levovacho. You shall serve the Lord your God with all your heart, b'chol levovacho. Levovacho is spelled there with two letters bet, levavacha, the two bets standing for the two sides of the heart. Well, in this man's tefillin, just one letter was absent, had become detached from the parchment. That was the letter bet, and indeed the man had this massive heart attack. So we see the protective power against our surroundings, the toxic surroundings, both physically toxic and psychologically and mentally toxic, the protection afforded by the segulot of the Holy Torah. One of the greatest of the segulot, the treasured practices that has apparently no physical influence on the surrounding environment, but has profound spiritual protection, is the daily recital of the portions printed in the Jewish prayer book, the Siddur, relating to how the temple incense was made, its ingredients and the way they were put together, and what the priests would do when they were preparing it. It is said to be a protection for our lives and our safety when we daily repeat these portions. Here we are bringing God's altar into our own lives by taking these passages which was filled with secrets and esoteric power, and by our mouthing them and speaking them, we are creating spiritual vibrations all around us that are bringing the very effects of the ketoret, the incense, and its purificatory power right into our space, into our life, into our being, into our very soul. This is one of the ways that we can rebuild the temple in our time, make a start to it, start making the foundations by building it in our minds and souls, by daily reviewing the portions in the Siddur that speak about the daily sacrifices. The portion of the ketoret, of the incense, is a part of the korbanot, the sacrificial part of the prayer book printed in the first part of the morning service of the Orthodox Jewish Siddur. And there you have the passages relating to the washing of the hands by the priests on entering into the temple for their service in the morning. You have the passage about the daily perpetual offering of one sheep in the morning, one sheep in the afternoon. And by reading this passage, followed by the passage of the Ketoret, we are bringing the temple into our souls, through our mouths, into the environment around us, and are preparing for the building of the temple. In this way, we are insulating ourselves against the plagues that are occurring in the world around us. Well, one could speak about many different plagues. One could go on and on about the morbidity of the culture around us. Today, thank God, as we look towards Rosh Chodesh Shevat, which in Israel marks the first sign towards the coming spring, looking already towards Tu B'Shvat, which is the official beginning of the spring in the land of Israel. There are, I know, many people across the world who breathed a huge sigh of relief when the new president of the United States, Mr. Donald Trump, was elected. And there are very many across the world who see now his presidency as an opportunity for a new spring for America. And certainly our prayers are for the people of America and the country of America that has carried the flag of freedom across the world. Sometimes that flag has been hoisted by and controlled by people who were not spreading the true freedom. Yet for generations of migrants from Europe and from China and from other places on earth into America, America was seen as a haven of freedom. And we've seen in the last decades the freedoms of the individual America being whittled away systematically, and to the point that many of those who voted for Donald Trump did so because they believed that he alone was able to reverse this tide in America. Many are indeed very hopeful that his presidency, through his personal friendship with and affection for the leader of Russia, Mr. Vladimir Putin, are hoping that this will lead to more cooperation between the world's two superpowers with China, and that these two together can put a moderating influence on China. As we do enter into the presidency of Mr. Donald Trump, with all of the hopes that so many have for it, one would have to be a fool not to realize that there are going to be enormous challenges to Mr. Trump in the pursuit of the policies for which he was elected. And it's impossible to tell right now whether the hopes of so many are going to be realized during this presidency. And I certainly wouldn't wait for your hopes to be realized. We have to already be keeping ourselves immune from the surrounding plagues with the expectation that they are very likely to grow. The forces that tried to put President Donald Trump's election opponent into power are still there and are fighting tooth and nail to disrupt whatever they can. And heaven alone knows what they're going to come up with in the coming months and years. And one of the things we have to realize is that if the boomerang has gone in one direction now, it could equally well go in the opposite direction in time to come. Jewish people, particularly when it comes to a time of optimism and a seeming new spring, are extremely cautious because of all of the disappointments that the Jewish people have suffered over the last 2,000 years of exile, including the a crushing disappointment that the state of Israel as we have it today, which is of course a precious gift of God to us, nevertheless has not as yet stood up to the expectations that it would be the state of the Torah, a country that would found itself on the law of Torah and the goals and aspirations of the Torah. So because of so often being disappointed, Jewish people are very often very conservative when it comes to high expectations for any a new leader. Our prayers are certainly for the new leader and that he will accomplish what many are hoping he will accomplish. But many people, particularly who live in Israel, who are devoted to the Torah, also know that the leadership of the state of Israel are, if anything, more obstinate opponents to the transfer of the United States Embassy to Jerusalem and the strengthening of the Israeli settlement in Judea and Samaria and reviving the dream of the greater Israel. The incumbent powers that be in America are more obstinately opposed to any of this than even some of the most extreme State Department officials. And anybody who is hoping that there's going to be a huge revolution in Israel in the coming months in terms of rightful and legal building in Israel's settlements in the disputed territories and a strengthening of the Israeli presence, I fear that people are going to be disappointed. And I would like to address a different aspect of this plague, and that is the level of our thoughts and mental processes. I think one of the things that Facebook has opened up is the ability of anybody and everybody to comment on anything and everything, and for everybody to put forth their own 2 cents. And one of the things that one sees in so many Facebook discussions about some posts, the comments, is how completely off at a tangent each one is from all of the others. And this is symptomatic of the Babel that has descended upon the world today, where few indeed are those that are speaking the same language. Everybody's talking a different language. Everybody's talking in tongues. Everybody perfectly convinced of the rectitude of what they say and what they think, and nobody bothering to so much as listen to a shadow of what the other person or the other people are saying. And this is a very non-messianic and anti-messianic phenomenon. Rabbi Nachman has pointed out in numerous teachings of his in his work Likutei Moharan that the stamp of the Moshiach is bringing people to dialogue with each other in the search not to win the argument against the other, but actually to find out and search for the truth. And that is the prophecy of Tzfanya, that humanity will come to serve God with one accord, with a purified language. And we today are at a stage in our culture where the different social splinter groups that are found everywhere, the millions of splinter groups, everybody has their own codes and own language, own jargon, own slang, own initials and other signs and signals to each other which are not shared by others. Nobody is talking to each other. And I think that one of the things that the true Israel, the Israelite in our time, needs to do is to clear ourselves of the muddled thinking of the surrounding media and the muddled thinking of our educational systems. For somebody who makes a lifetime study of our Torah and systematically seeks to acquaint oneself with and learn and analyze the halachot in all of the different areas and to search out the reasoning behind the different halachot and how the oral Torah teachings relate back and through which reasoning to the texts of the Tanakh. So anybody who makes such a pursuit is clarifying and organizing their mind into subject areas, into hierarchies of knowledge. And this is something which the surrounding world is today unable to do with the infinite explosion of knowledge, with the constant development of new fields of knowledge, new sciences, new disciplines, new discoveries. Nobody at all can keep abreast of all of it. Impossible. The dream of the Renaissance man that was able to be a master of sciences and arts is long gone kaput. But when a person devotes themselves to the study of the divine wisdom in the Torah, God's Torah is his unity. The diversity of the 613 commandments is actually God's unified law for Israel and for the world, through which he runs the world. And therefore, through focusing on the one Torah, we're actually able to encompass all of the other wisdoms. At first, when one is struggling through to acquaint oneself with the Tanakh and with the portions of the Torah, what are the 613 mitzvahs, what are the laws of Shabbat, what are the different areas of the Mishnah, it may seem far away to see how this system of knowledge actually comprehends all knowledge. But those who have seen the literature of the Kabbalah, particularly of the Holy Zohar and of the writings of Rabbi Isaac Luria, can see how all of the worlds and all of the wisdoms of the worlds, all of the sciences and all of the arts are included in the Torah. And therefore the remedy for muddled minds is the study of the Torah, the study of the weekly portion, the study of the halacha. One can see in contemporary political discourse and the discourse of the streets and the markets and the shoutings at the demonstrations and the protest marches, completely muddled thinking, the ignorance of the most basic logical argument. Well, Socrates is crazy, Socrates is a Greek, therefore all Greeks are crazy. That is one of the key false arguments that opens up all of the slanging matches and the mudslinging that is going on today between all of the different factions. And for the sake of our children and their future and the generations that they will breed, we need really to search out ways of enhancing the thought processes and clarifying and cleaning up the thought process of ourselves and our dear ones and our children. Those who are bringing up and educating little children need to break away from the slush that is presented into everybody's minds and thoughts by the media from the earliest age. where in most homes across the world, the little children are glued to the television from their earliest months of existence. We need to protect our children from this pernicious influence that is corrupting and destroying their minds with the complicity of the mass media, the TV companies, and those that finance them from the various highest of levels. The emancipation from this plague of disinformation and misinformation and faulty thinking and faulty logic, the emancipation from this is the serious study of the Torah as a serious intellectual pursuit that has the power to clarify people's minds, to enable people to develop an understanding of the difference between a true argument and a false argument, a true induction and a false induction. Well, one could go on and on about the plagues around us. If we started to get into the political plagues, the plague of corruption in most levels of government, national and local, across the entire world, the corruption of the judiciaries, the corruption of the media, the fact that the media in the pay of forces that wish to corrupt the surrounding societies. The only solution to these plagues is the code of the Noahide laws, with the commandment to set up courts of true justice and judicial systems of true justice. And we owe it to the coming generations to do everything in our power to promote the Noahide code and the commandment to all humanity to have a true, clean, non-corrupt system of justice. Well, now, when it comes to the opening of the Noahide code, the prohibition against idolatry, today's idolatries are so subtle. The paganism of our world does not call itself religion, it calls itself emancipation from religion. And it's precisely here that the enslavement of the surrounding population is so deep. The surrounding population and we ourselves are all enslaved to the financial system of the day, which is the latter-day pyramids of Egypt and the other projects of Egypt that Pharaoh was forcing everybody to build. And everybody's enslaved to the credit card company, to the banks, to the mortgage banks, and all of the other forms of enslavement, or to their employers and to their paycheck. We're all enslaved to this and enslaved to the enhanced expectations which we all have from the surrounding advertising and promotion of products. So in this respect, it's very hard to break out of this slavery without the holy Shabbat, which enables us to free ourselves for one day a week for 25 hours of the day from that surrounding madness. But the slavery to ideology, we can all in our minds break free from. One of the things you see about the developing societies around us is that actually people's lives, even if they're becoming longer, are becoming more miserable. For example, in my native Britain, the age of retirement has been raised from what it used to be, that women would retire at 60 and men at 65. And now people are expected to work up into their 70s without a moment respite. Looking at the lifestyle pages of the internet newspapers that I read from Britain, people are talking about how you need to squeeze in your hour of exercise every day and to be conscious of your nutrition and your diet, all to keep on running at this breakneck, hectic pace to keep up with your repayments of debts, your repayments of mortgage, in order to maintain this lifestyle. It's a known fact in Britain and many other countries today that a person begins life, if they wish to study in a university, saddled by the most enormous debts that are going to keep them enslaved to the banks for most of their prime years. And it's only when we begin to understand these kinds of idolatries, the idolatry of food and the idolatry of sex, the idolatry of the celebrities and the stars who are literally called the idols of our day because they are the role models. We have to break down these idols in our own minds and thoughts and in the minds and thoughts of our children. And this is the way that we can escape from the idolatries and the plagues of the world around us. What you see in the world today for most people is a very bleak existence where they're constantly promised coming gratification, but the gratification is constantly receding. It's already always being deferred, yet further and further. The final moment of gratification is always deferred, and the whole world is led to be racing after illusions. And the one that puts his or her mind upon the Torah, upon the words of the Torah, the Hebrew words of the Torah texts, and the traditions of the Torah, and the commandments and their application in our lives, in the kitchen, at our table, in our weekly family life of Shabbat, or with our friends, in our prayer life, in our meditation, in our pursuit of the commandments of kindness and charity and all of the other commandments. Through doing this, we're actually providing ourselves with the best insulation and separation from the surrounding plagues of this dying culture. To say that the redemption has come within a year, that would be madness to say such a thing. Because what is important about the redemption is what happens in your heart and my heart. And that is a process. If we've not yet completed our repentance, then we have a lot of work ahead of us, and that is why God is giving us this life and is extending the judgment. We see judgments being executed across the world every way. The outbreaks of terrorist shootings and killings in places across the world, literally daily explosions and rammings and shootings. All of these are God's judgments. And when we see these plagues, we are to interiorize our fear and our awe of the Creator that is bringing about this judgment, but to be joyous, as it's written in the Psalms, Gilu bir'odo, rejoice with trembling, when you see the plagues and the judgments being executed on the surrounding world. And you have the light that shines to Israel, and all of the habitations of Israel, there is light. We will, in this merit, see in our time, with the help of God, the complete redemption through our acts of teshuvah, embracing the holiness of the Torah and the service of God. My dear friends, as we approach Rosh Chodesh Shevat, the new moon of the month of Shevat, this coming Friday night, and Shabbat, it is a new year, the new year of the tree. We're entering that season according to the house of Shammai. This coming Shabbat will be the festival of the trees. We go by the ruling of Bet Hillel that it's on the 15th of Shevat. Nevertheless, on the 1st of Shevat, Rosh Chodesh Shevat, this coming Friday night and Shabbat, that is already Shabbat, and already into the season of the regeneration, the new spring, which must be in your and my hearts. This week in our Azamra online Internet Kollel, we'll have our study session tomorrow, Monday, in now entering the Hebrew text of the book of Job, this wonderful, amazing work that we will be studying in the coming months with the help of God. And we'll be concluding our study of the Mishneh tractate of Chulin with our study of the very beautiful mitzvah of Shiluach Haken, sending away the mother bird when a person is taking the chicks and eggs from the nest, a mitzvah with the most profound esoteric significance. So do join me, please, for that. My family have two joyous celebrations this week with two of our grandsons who are just reaching the age of 3 years old. And we will be traveling, my wife and I, from Jerusalem on Tuesday up to the north of Israel to the Galilee, to Tzfat, from where we'll be going on to Meron for the hair cuttings of our grandsons and some celebrations of their reaching this stage in their lives. And for that reason, since I will not be in Jerusalem on Wednesday or Thursday, there will be no Kollel sessions this week except for tomorrow. And with the help of Hashem, Kollel sessions after tomorrow will resume 1 week from today. With that, my dear friends, I would like to wish you Shavua Tov Vorach, a good and a blessed week from here in the holy city of Jerusalem, Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh. Shavua Tov Vorach, good and a blessed week, and Chodesh Tov Vorach, a good and a blessed month.